Another shout out for the breakfast crew. Saturday morning, come in here and have breakfast. You know, they get here at 7, which means they're probably up at 5:30 or 6 or whatever, you know, to make breakfast so all the rest of us can do this. So our speaker today is Latessa Meader. Get on my readers. Latessa is a multifaceted aviator and educator with experience as a turbine engine mechanic, propulsion engineer, make it louder, military pilot. Is that better? More? You need more? More? Good? All right. Turbine engine mechanic, propulsion engineer, military pilot, math teacher. She brings her passion for aviation and education together as the founder of the nonprofit Aspire, the Airspace STEAM program inspiring through real-world experiences. Latessa likes to keep things interesting as a former competitive skydiver, current sailor, Red Cross first aid CPR instructor, and mom of 2. Today she is thrilled to speak with us about the C130 and its capabilities. So a warm welcome for Latessa.
Thank you so much, Billy. I appreciate it. Can you guys hear me if I'm just talking? Okay, I usually teach, so I move my hands a lot, so this is going to be really weird. We'll try. Can you guys hear me if I'm holding it? Okay, all right. I'll do my best to be still. I had no idea who I was coming to talk to this morning. I usually teach elementary school-ish and middle school-age students, and Lewis asked me to come speak, and I was like, yeah, sure. Like, what's the group? And he's like, oh, it is the EAA group, not a group of students you guys are teaching. So I was like, okay, I don't really know who's in this group. Let's find out. I've had such a great time talking to you guys already this morning. So many interesting people here with some really interesting backgrounds on C130s. I hear there's some Delta Tech Ops back there. We got some military. So this is going to be really fun. I want this to be more of a conversation and interaction with you guys than me just pointing at pictures up here. So we'll try to keep it interactive. Feel free to stop me. We'll go into detail on something that sounds interesting. We'll glaze over things that don't, all right? I'll give you a little bit of background on where I'm coming from. So this is kind of what we'll talk about, my background and perspective, so you know where I'm coming from. The C-130 and some of its capabilities, as well as some of the special missions. I love C-130s. It's such a cool airplane, and I'm really only scratching the surface today on some of the things that it can do. So I've had a very non-linear career. I'm the luckiest person in the world that all of these things have come together for me. I was a high school math teacher. I grew up in rural North Georgia. It was the only career that I saw that looked interesting as a child growing up was math, because math is fun. So I went to UGA, got an undergrad in math education, and when I left there, I'd sort of become a little more interested in more sciencey and engineering and engines, and I was like, I really want to learn more about turbine engines. So I enlisted in the military, in the Air Force, specifically to work on turbine engines. So I was a turbine engine mechanic for 7 years in the reserves, and in that time, I fell in love with airplanes, as we do, and went back to school to study airplanes, got a master's in aerospace engineering from Georgia Tech. Totally changed my career path and went into engineering. Was an engineer for Delta Tech Ops, and I got somebody in the back of Tech Ops. Loved that. It was amazing. Started flying, got my private pilot's license, and deployed with my unit. At that point, I had a degree in aerospace engineering, and they knew me because I'd been a mechanic for about 7 years for them. They're like, why don't you come fly the C-130? That's a great idea. Let's do that. So then I became a C-130 pilot, J models out of Keesler, and that was going great. Love C-130s. Had my first daughter, and commuting from Atlanta to Keesler was not going to be functional with an infant, so I interviewed at Dobbins and started flying the H model C-130 out of Dobbins, which is the older version C-130. And that's kind of where I've been career-wise. I've been at Dobbins since then. I've had a second daughter, so Maya and Mackenzie are my little ones. They're 8 and 5 at this point. And now I'm reaching all the way back to my early days to education and bringing in the education combined with the engineering and the piloting, and have created Aspire, the aerospace STEAM program inspiring through real-world experiences. And it's a nonprofit now, and we go and teach. We have elementary school curriculum, we have middle school summer camps, and we're kind of reaching into high school now, doing resume reviews and mock interviews and trying to get students ready to go into whatever career they want, be it aviation or not. So that's kind of my perspective on where we're going to go from here. All right, so let's jump into C-130s. I love C-130s. I've flown on the J model and the H model and had a teensy bit of experience on the A model. I fly slicks, which means we aren't a specialized mission. So there are a lot of specialized C-130s that do a lot of very specific missions. The aircraft is outfitted for those missions, and those are the ones we're going to talk about later. But as a slick C-130, we do a little bit of everything. We're the jack of all trades for the C-130. So airdrop is a huge capability for the C-130. Heavy equipment is one of the things that we do. So it could be a Humvee, it could be any kind of vehicle. It's usually built up on some hard foundation and then some honeycomb type cardboard, right, that'll compress and absorb that shock when it hits. It's big enough that it has a drogue chute. You can't really see the whole thing, but there's more chutes out this way, kind of in this whole heavy equipment extraction setup. And it's heavy enough the drogue chute pulls the heavy equipment out of the aircraft, and then the two really big, usually like 28-foot ring slot parachutes, open up to gently descend the heavy equipment down to the ground, and then the honeycomb will absorb some of the shock when it hits. So it's one of our heavy equipment capabilities. Container delivery system is the most common airdrop type because it's just in boxes. So we call it the beans and bullets, essentially. Anything that'll fit in a box we can drop out with the CDS, container delivery system. And they're just set up as boxes. They have them all lined up in the back of the C-130. We do 2 sticks of them. So we have them kind of 2 sticks lined up in the back of the C-130. And we actually dump them out. So this one is extracted with an extraction chute. In CDS, we just tilt the nose of the airplane up and just let them all slide out. Gravity pulls them out. And they each have their own little parachutes. Variations on this, we do HV CDS, high velocity CDS, which is basically a trash bag for a parachute. So it can fall and it's just going to be trash when it's done. And that's stuff that we don't ever plan on recovering, right? Somewhere in the mountains or in some remote areas we don't plan on getting back into. But it enables us to get things right where it needs to go. So high velocity CDS or normal CDS, and that's kind of how we get heavy equipment CDS. Talk about that anymore? Anything interesting there? I'm sure we'll, yeah. You can really feel this one. These can be heavy. I mean, these can be up to 40,000 pounds we can drop out. So significant change in CG. And for this one, you're flying straight and level and the extraction chute pulls it out, right? But you can feel it. And so obviously the whole airplane wants to do this as it's going out. So you got that a lot of pressure on the yoke as it's going out the back. But then you got to get the pressure off as soon as it drops because then your CG is coming right back down. So yeah, very much you can feel it going out, but it's manageable. The first time it catches you by surprise, but then you're like, oh, okay, I got it. Pressure here, release the pressure on time, and it works itself out.
Flight controls, hydraulic assist?
Yes, so H model, yes, they are all hydraulic assist. The rudders, we actually have cables for our rudders in the H model. In the J model, it's all fly-by-wire. So I've flown both, so there are no cables in the J model.
That'd be a lot better.
Yes, they're making progress in technology. So they call it J baby. I grew up on the J model, the new C-130, glass cockpit, a HUD like the fighters. It's got a turn noodle. It analyzes the winds for you. It has a ghost flight path marker. It has auto throttles. It has all the bells and whistles, right, in the J model. And I interviewed with a squadron that I knew flew H models for my family because I needed to move back here. I was dreading it. I was like, this is going to be awful. I got to fly this old airplane. I get in it, absolutely love it. I will take the H3 over a J model any day. It is so much fun to fly. It feels like reaching back into history because it hasn't changed much since the A model. The J model is a significant step in the right direction. The H model is basically the same. We have the steam gauges, the Lockheed Martin fix, right? A gauge isn't showing you what you want. Just tap on it a little bit, see if it comes back. So, and I feel like a real pilot flying the H model because it doesn't do anything for you. Did I answer your question? I might get distracted. Airplanes are great. One following the other is usually how we'll do 2 sticks. Yeah. And it's rare to do it, really, to have that many in there, but we can. We have capability to do that. Cool? All right, here's a little bit more airdrop. This is LCLA, low cost, low altitude. So this is when we really, really need to get it right on that spot, right? This isn't even around this area. This is right here. We want a box. So it is very low. We're 300 feet off the ground. And the loadmaster, as you can see, this is our loadmaster in the back. He's strapped into a harness, so he's hooked into one of these eyelets a little bit further back. This is on the edge of the ramp. They kind of walk it back, and this is the only strap. You see this white one going over? That's the only strap keeping it in. And we get to the point where we want it, and it's not even like there's no extraction chute, and we don't even pitch up for this one. We get there, we call green light. He's literally got his foot on it, right? Cuts the strap and kicks it out the back. And it's a few seconds before it hits the ground. So we can put this exactly where we want it.
Are they doing these types of operations in North Carolina right now?
So I'm in the reserves, which is federally funded, right? So typically we don't get more of the local stuff. The Guard gets the local taskings. So I don't really know what's going on. I'm also still on deployment orders. I just got back from a deployment, so I'm not in the loop right now on what they're doing. But I'm guessing we're going to be getting things tasked at this point. But right now, nothing. For the reserves, nothing has come down. I don't know if the Guard's doing anything yet, but I imagine they will be in the very near future. Yeah, I don't think there's anywhere good to land back up there right now. It's a mess, so like it may be some airdrops to get things in there. So yeah, so that's LCLA, kind of a fun version.
Was this system used to transport the M1 tank to Fort Bragg back in 2012?
I don't know. I wasn't flying it then. Flying that mission.
I heard they were dropping 3 parachutes.
So that's a heavy, yeah.
I don't want to be into that.
No, so that's a heavy drop. So that first one we looked at. So yeah, if they were dropping them and they had big parachutes, yes. If they were doing the heavy equipment drop, they were doing this one. And for this one, we're kind of straight and level, like I said, because it has an extraction parachute. It has a bomb drop. I don't think I have a good picture inside, but right inside the door, we hook up the drogue chute that's going to pull it out. And so we hit green light. The arm like swings down and it throws the parachute into the slipstream. And when that inflates, it actually pulls the pin. There's a whole lot of mechanisms to get these parachutes out at the correct time, because this can bring a C-130 down. There have been fatal crashes from heavy drops. If something goes wrong, if it gets jammed up in there, they drag from the big 3 parachutes that he's talking about will bring a C-130 down. It has. And so we've had corrections in our checklist to how do we mitigate this issue. There has been an EPJS, electronic, I forget what the acronym stands for, but basically it'll cut the lines itself if we have if something hangs up in the back. It'll cut the parachutes because it's too much drag for the C-130. It can't overcome it. So, yes, if there was parachutes and they were dropping equipment, like vehicles, they were doing that drop. All right, some more airdrops. Personnel. So we throw these squishy little pink bodies out the back, right? So we can do a couple of different variations on this one. The Army paratroopers, this is the one we do the most. It's hung up on this, what's called a static line. It's called a static line drop. So this cable is attached to the airplane, and each one of the jumpers is attached in their order to that static line. So when they jump out, they don't pull their parachute. The airplane pulls their parachute. So they're going out the troop doors, which are on the sides of the C-130, right? So they're stepping out there, and the yellow line stays in the airplane. They get under canopy within a few seconds, and it's usually not very high, 1,000 feet, give or take, above the ground for doing the Army parachute drops. And that's more for getting massive amount of people in one place at one time. We can do this in formation. We can be 2,000 feet behind the next aircraft and be dropping hundreds of guys out the back. So 60 is a good number to have in our airplane. In the 60s, we can do more, but it gets real tight in there in the C-130. So we can put that many on. We can do it in formation. We can do it over and over again. So that's the static line for the Army. The other one is Halo. So fun for them doing basically skydiving out the back of the C-130. So they typically go out the back. I'm sure you've seen the videos, right? They just step off the back and they like disappear behind the C-130. Yeah, they're doing Halo, which is high altitude drop, low altitude open. So that's what Halo stands for. It can be as high as up to the 20,000s of feet. It's real cold and there's no oxygen up there, so there's a little bit that goes into doing that. For one, the air crew, because you like your pilot's brain cells to be working and they need oxygen to do that. So if we're going to drop anything above 10,000, we're going to be on oxygen to do the drop, which just adds complications to everything. It's at that point, you hear recordings of like the fighters where you hear them breathe all the time, and it's the same thing, right? We're on this oxygen mask, and just makes everything a little more complicated. And at those high altitudes, even the jumpers have to pre-breathe oxygen, 100% oxygen, so that they've got oxygen in their body, because there's not going to be enough till they get down to about About 15,000 feet, we start getting enough molecules, and then about 10,000 feet, there's enough oxygen molecules to function pretty well. But yep, so it's Halo, paratroops. This was a drop in, I think this one was at Dobbins, actually. It was just a mass drop over at Dobbins. We call it Tyler DZ. You guys familiar with Dobbins, I'm guessing, right? Yeah. So just did a drop with the Army guys over at Dobbins. Any questions about personnel drops? Yeah? It's easy? Go ahead. Yeah, you feel them in the back. You feel their little boots like going out the back. So you can feel them like stomping out, and some of them need to be like encouraged out the door a little bit if it's their first drop. Our load master would be the one taking this picture. So this is like a jump master. So they're managing their guys and their jumpers, and they've got their hand signals to tell them when to stand up, when to hook in, like how much time is left, 30 seconds, they're about to drop, things like that. And our load masters don't manage the jumpers when they're jumping. They manage the aircraft when the jumpers are out. So our load masters are just standing here, kind of out of the way. The paratroop door is like right here. So our load masters are just kind of standing up behind that and all out of the way, just watching this happen. And then when they're out, they pull all the D lines, the deployment lines, all these yellow lines. They pull all those guys in, and they get the door shut. Yeah. These are a lot easier for us. We're just like, bye. They jump and they go. We also do a lot of air-land, which is really a lot more practical. We train to the other stuff because it's a lot harder. It takes a lot more skill to be good at airdrop, to get it where you want to get it. There's a lot of wind analysis and all that goes into. So we do a lot of practicing with the airdrop. But really, air-land is the meat and potatoes. This is really what we do. We can carry enormous pieces of equipment doing that, or piles of boxes, strap it in. We do ISU 90s, which are big metal boxes that pretty much cover the entirety of the cargo compartment. We can carry those, and we land somewhere and we take them off. This is what we did this whole summer. I just got back from a deployment to Djibouti, so we were stationed in Djibouti and flew most of our missions in Somalia and a little bit in Kenya, and it was all air-land. We're either moving people to the FOBs, the forward operating bases that they need to be at in Somalia or Kenya, or we were taking them, their mail. We did a lot of mail runs. We're taking human blood because there's not a lot of medical facilities down there. Or their food, their cargo, whatever equipment. We moved MQ-1s, so we were doing drones. Some big like Lidl pole that was as long as the back of the C-130, even when it was folded up, that was a little bit different. Some really big vehicles. So this is really a lot of what we do in the real world, like for when it's needed. But all the cool stuff is available. We trained all of that so we can use it when it's needed. Max takeoff weight depends. The aviation answer to everything, right? 155 is our normal max takeoff weight. We can take off at 174, but somebody with bling on their shoulders has got to sign off on that. There's a lot of stress on the wings, particularly the wing roots of the C-130. About 42,000. But again, it depends, right? How much fuel are we putting on? So our missions were really long. Stationed in Djibouti, we had at least 3 to 5 hours of flying to get where we were going in either southern Somalia or Kenya. And then we had to be able to get back too. So sometimes we could only take 20-ish something pounds in the bag because we needed the fuel, right? We were taking off around 155 every time.
Which runway do you use, full versus
It's big range there as well. So our shortest in peacetime is 3,000 feet. Even if we're doing a max takeoff, that gives us a really good safety buffer. 3,000 feet isn't really that long, but that's more than we need to take off, particularly if we're light. If we're light, so we've taken something heavy, the middle of nowhere, we're lower on fuel, we don't have any cargo in the back, we could take off in 2,000, even less feet. So 3,000 is our prescribed during peacetime. And all of these we had some assault takeoffs, but they were right at 3,000. So haven't done anything shorter than 3,000 because we have to have a waiver for that too, because you have a risk at that point. If something goes wrong, you are going off the end of the runway. So 3,000, and it depends on kind of really what you mean too, like how fast are we going to lift off, or like how much runway do you need to get your refusal and then stop, without killing the crew by the end. So that's where the 3,000 comes in. We can really take off in 1,500. Depending on how heavy we are. Cool. So old, 1961. So cool. Gentleman flew A models, awesome, so cool. He might have actually been in the same one that I was in a few months ago. So that's really cool. So currently it's owned by the Bangladesh Air Force. I did not realize this happens, but when our airplanes get too old for the U.S. military to fly, we just sell them to other people who are willing to fly them. To include a 1961 A model that is still flying currently in the Congo for the UN, doing peacekeeping missions. And it had a huge overhaul up in Cascade Aerospace. It was up in Canada. And we went up there to do the flight check, the FCF on it, to get it back into service. And it was cool. It was cool how similar it was to an H model. And still some differences. Like, there's some progress. But it was really cool that from A to H, like, it's very, very similar. You know you're in a C130. You know where to look for things. So that was kind of cool.
There's dozens of them stored at Davis Mountain.
Yeah, so a lot of them get mothballed. But the fact that this one was still flying, I was like, what? That's cool. 300 true, give or take, up at altitude. We just got new engines. We got new engines and we got new propellers on our H model. So we were on H3s, which is the best airplane. That's the one I would pick over a J model. It's good. They fixed a lot of the human factors issues in it. They put a little bit of comfort issues in it. They fixed some really stupid things that shouldn't have taken that long to fix, like NVG, night vision goggles. We've been flying with them for decades. The H2 model, it doesn't have night vision compatible lights in it. So we would literally duct tape our safety lights because they would wash out NVGs. I thought they were kidding the first time I got in an H model. And I was like, we're going to do what? Coming from the J, that sounded insane. But yeah, the H3 is awesome. So we have invis lighting. We have a McCaw's master caution and warning panel, which the J was built with originally. And the H3 had to be modified to have that. The H2s didn't have it. So they had just lights all over, right? If you're an engineer, you've got all your switches and gauges up here. The pilot's got all this stuff over here, right? And if something was wrong, a little light would go on wherever that sensor was, wherever that gauge was, which is terrible. Like, your scan can't be like this and be functional, right? So they fixed that. We now have a master caution and warning panel, so a light in one place will go off and be like, hey, go look at your oil pressure. It's not good. And then you can go to your oil pressure and figure out what's going on. Makes so much more sense. So they fixed that. We have, this is a little bit silly, but, comfort. They put little shelves in the H3, so like we can put a water bottle, we can put our checklist and stuff like that. The H2 just is a flat wall, so you have like nowhere to put anything, so it's kind of hard to function in that space if you don't have somewhere to build your little nest. As a pilot, you got to build your nest. So yeah, H3 is awesome.
New wing spires?
Wind spires?
Spires. The main wing spire? Did they replace them? Fix them? No.
I don't know. I don't know anything about that.
We were having issues with the spire.
In the wing root, we had some root cracking issues.
Right.
Yeah, so they did inspections on all of those. Yes, they did a lot of NDT inspections, replaced what they had to replace on those. That'll be, the wing cracking will be interesting. We'll talk about that a little bit more later too.
Did I hear you say Model H?
Yes,
Is there a Model J?
yes. So I started on the J model, the newest C130 that came out in '94. I think that's when they transitioned over. So the last H is '94 and the first J is '94, I think. And so I started on the '94, '95 J models at Kiesler, which was the fancy, right? The new Gucci airplane, all the bells and whistles, glass cockpit, has all the stuff in it, right? And now I moved back in time, and I'm flying the H model, which I love.
C130, F-150.
Yes. Cool. Oh, so we talked about that. This is another thing we do, aeromedical evacuation. Most of the time, we're just carrying a patient from point A to point B, and we have AEs, aeromedical personnel in the back. We've got some nurses, occasionally a doctor back there that take care of patients who aren't doing too well. There can be issues with pressurization depending on what they need or what's going on with them. So a few differences flying AEs, but mostly it's more like a commercial flight. You're just going point A to point B, straight line, land them, get them where they need to go. They are trying to expand that kind of capability. This was really cool. This was a Raven. This is a dummy. This was a Raven exercise with the Marines, and this was the 2nd Med Battalion, who are battlefield surgeons. So they're not they're called roll two. So they don't go do the fighting. So they are one step removed from that. So the second stage here. And usually they're doing life-saving surgeries in a tent or something right off of the battlefield. And they want to extend that capability into the back of cargo airplanes like the C-130. I thought they meant they were going to like pull a patient on and like maybe stop something bleeding, and then we would take off to some bigger echelon, higher echelon of care at a hospital or something. No, they meant they were going to do surgery in the back of the C-130 while we were flying them there. It's like, have you been in the back of a C-130? It turned out, no, they had not. So they were like, do you have trays for our instruments? And I was like, clearly you have not been in the back of a C-130. So we started from the ground up teaching these Roll 2 medics what they had to work with in the back of a C-130. So the first day I met with them was the first day they'd walked on the back. And I was like, it's a big box. What you want to do with it? So we figured out how to like stack up some boxes so they could have somewhere to put their instruments, so a tray for their instruments. These are litters. So basically really uncomfortable cots that we hook up to put the patients on. So this is actual person here, but he's wearing a cut suit, which I also didn't know was a thing until this exercise. It's a very fancy body, essentially, and it has all of the layers. It has a skin layer, a muscle layer. If you cut the wrong things, it bleeds. It's got like fatty layers. It's got the organs. It's got all the stuff in here for these surgeons. And they were simulating there was some internal damage, and they were going to bleed out by the time we got to where we're higher echelon of care we were going. So they had to do emergency surgery in the back of the aircraft. So that's what they did. And we knew that was coming at the end of the week, so we'd kind of been leading up to that all week, figured out how to get them in the back of the C-130 where they were going to put their tools. And then when we did some engine running operations. When we turned the air conditioner on, the humidity just like dumps out of there, right? So like it's a mess. It is not a sterile environment. So we had to figure out how to hook up sheets to catch anything coming out of the air conditioning, so it's not going directly into the surgery patient's body. And they did. They did the surgery, and they found the bleeder, and they punched it and did whatever they had to do and closed them up. And so simulated our simulated injury patient made it, which was great. But that was bonkers. I was like, I can't believe you guys are doing this. But yeah, so we can transport patients, but we can also be a flying hospital.
At what altitude?
I think we were probably 12 or 14, like for that. It depends on what they need in the back. So if we're gonna stay unpressurized, we'll stay below 10. So 10 is our max if we're gonna stay unpressurized. They said that was not a concern for this one, so we were pressurized, and it didn't matter what altitude really we were going to for that one. The airplane I'm in now the H model doesn't go very high. We got new engines and we got new props. I love the new props. Are you familiar with the old C-130? The silver looks like a big Hamilton Standard boat oar. The props are just big silver boat oars. Not aerodynamically efficient at all. Well, we've upgraded, so much more like the J model. The J model has a Dowty blade, fiberglass, has like actual aerodynamic twist to it. We've learned a lot of things since we've made the original props. So the H model now has that too. Actually, I have 8 blades. J model has 6 blades, and they look great. They look amazing. They're not efficient at altitude. They're great for low levels, which is really one of our strong capabilities. So they've given us that ability, but at altitude, they're terrible. So we barely get up into like 20,000. If we're heavy, we may not even be able to get to 20,000. And previously, we were more in like the low 20s. If we weren't too heavy, we could make it up to 24, maybe 26. The J models can get up in the high 20s, so they're more like 28, and if they're very light, maybe 30. But in the current configuration of this airplane, while it has really strong low-level capabilities, it does not have good high-level capabilities. All right. Speaking of low levels, we fly formation, low levels. We do 300 to 500 feet. We call it modified contour, so especially up in the mountains here, we go up with the mountains and we go down with the valleys. Yeah, so it's a lot of fun. Really easy to make somebody puke if you want in the back of these. It is in the front, it's okay. In the back, it is rough. At Loadmaster Appreciation Day, when we had an extra pilot, and I was like, I'm gonna go to the back and see what the Loadmasters are doing. And I was like, let me back up front. I cannot take this. It is bumpy, and your inner ears are like, what is going on? So, yeah, it's a lot of fun, especially in the front. So this is fingertip formation essentially for a C-130. We don't get closer than 500 feet with the big aircraft, and we just zip around North Georgia. It's a lot of fun. And then we usually go straight into an airdrop from here. Our airdrop platforms are out Rome, Georgia, so we do all of our airdrop out there. We can do big formations. Actually, I have formation slide, I think, too. Assault landing. So you're talking about 3,000 feet is our minimum for peacetime. Realistically, it can be less than 2,000 depending on where we were going and what we were doing and what the need was. But 3,000 in general is a good number. It can be dirt, it can be grass. There's like a metal grating that they put down to try to keep the runways together. So I've landed on that. We actually had some metal matting in Somalia that we were on. So it can be a little anything. It's real hardy airplane. The reason we can do this is one, we're propeller airplanes. Our intakes are not as big. And two, we're so high up off the ground for the intakes. So FOD is a very low concern for this aircraft in general. So we can land kind of anything. I'm trying to think of some of the interesting landings I've had. Up in Virginia, there's a dirt strip up there. Very undulating dirt strip, as I found out on takeoff. Like, whew, it was a little sporty. You hit those bumps and your airplane's like getting a little air before it's fast enough. I'm like, what is happening? You get enough speed by the end and you're airborne and it's fine. But that was one of the more interesting takeoffs. And that was up in mountains, I think up in West Virginia. Did some assault landings on what we called semi-improved surface in Guam. That was kind of interesting on Tinian Island. I've got some history buffs in here. Probably know what's on Tinian Island. And as we're looking on Google Maps, we're like, this is the bomb shelter where they loaded the atomic bomb on the strip that I took off on. It was not a dirt strip at the time. It was a very good runway, but that was a lot of decades ago. So it was kind of in disrepair, had grass growing up through the cracks, and we had a good 3,000 feet that were acceptable to take off on. That was kind of interesting bit of history to tertiary be cross paths with. All right, formation. So you saw like the two airplanes kind of close doing a formation, or we can do big formations. If we need to get mass on a drop zone, we could do that. So this was an 8 ship, and this one was kind of cool. So I was number 5 in the formation. So I 1, 2, 3, 4, and I was here and took the picture. And then we had 3 aircraft from another unit come join us, right? So then we had 3 these guys are going this way. These guys are going that way, okay? And we math, figure out, right, how fast you're going, what your separation is, and when you need to turn. So we did all the calculations, right? That's all been figured out. So we figured it out for us specifically on this day, and they all pulled a U-wing and just pulled it right behind us, and we became a 5 ship immediately into an 8 ship. That was kind of fun. I've been I think 21 of a 23 ship formation, and we can do bigger too. Just depends what's needed. There hasn't been a lot of that obviously since World War II. We were doing massive anything anywhere, but we still train to it, so we still have the capabilities. Questions on formations or anything? Good stuff. Okay. Our Mach 1 eyeballs. Yeah, we have a couple of things to look for. There's a skid bar underneath the tail, which is really for doing like no flap landings. If you flare too much, you could skid the back of the airplane. And so it's really there to protect that. But it's not very big. I mean, it's probably bigger than my thumb, but not a whole lot bigger than that. That runs down the back of it. You can't see it very far, right, until you're about 2,000 feet. And so if you can see that there's a little notch there, you're about 2,000 feet, because that's about what your eyeballs can pick up. For taxing or different things like that, the horizontal stabilizer in the back, if that is between the number 1 and number 4 engine, if you kind of have those lined up directly behind it, you're about 4,000 feet. So we figured out some references and things like that. When you're doing 500 feet, like when we're really close, the pilot isn't even looking inside at all. You're completely hooked on the other airplane. We did a lot more fingertip formation, legit fingertip, like 6 to 10 feet in T6s. So back in pilot training, which was a much smaller single engine turboprop aerobatic aircraft. So fun. If you guys haven't gotten to fly a T6, if you have the opportunity, go for it. Good old Texan 2. And we did fingertip formation with that. And we would do loops in fingertip formation. And the pilot of second, number 2, has no idea what's going on. All they are locked onto is the other aircraft wing. So we did literally do loops, and the other pilot doesn't know. It's a 1G maneuver, like you're doing a barrel roll or something like that. You don't realize you're upside down because you were locked on that other aircraft. So some different techniques depending on what type of formation flying you're doing. For big formation flying, we have what's called SKI, station keeping equipment. which was designed for ships, not designed for airplanes. So we move way faster and we're way closer than the system can really handle, but it tries. And it gives us something. So we, on our radar screen, every time it goes around, right, it does a little thing, and it does a little blip, and it kind of shows us where the other airplanes are. So it's decent for SA. And if we're flying in the weather, which is what ski is for, to be flying formation blind, if we're in the weather, we're going to be 4,000 feet from the other aircraft. We're not going any closer than that. So it works out fine that it's not really, it doesn't update any faster than it does. But we're not doing that when we're in close range. That's all visual. And with ski, I mean, we can have a ton of airplanes hooked up to ski, and it'll keep us safe. And we can do airdrops based on that as well. So we can do airdrops RVAD, which is like when the weather's bad and we can't see the ground. We can do airdrops after we've done like radar updates on our system, so we know exactly where we are. We're very precise with our positioning at the time. So ski is kind of cool that it gives us that capability, but it really wasn't designed for what we use it for. It's got its limitations. But yeah, formation's fun. This is kind of cool. So this was originally the night vision goggles that I learned to fly on, the old green, right? I'm used to that. If anybody hunts, probably got some of these. And it's so cool. You can look under here, and it's this dark, right? It's pitch black, can't see anything. And with these on, you're like, oh, that's cool. Like, you can kind of tell there's individual trees in there, and clearly you can tell the horizon. You got some stars and stuff up here. And if there's an animal, like a deer or something moving, you can definitely see that kind of stuff. Oh, this is really cool. We now have updated white phosphorus NVGs. This is the Milky Way on NVGs. This was probably over Ethiopia this summer. It was incredible. The definition that you have on these white phosphorus NVGs. I saw a field mouse after we landed. You can see a field mouse running in the grass. All of a sudden, I was like, "There's no way!" And you look under him, absolutely pitch black, like no cultural lighting in southern Somalia. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing!" So really cool technology, and we get to fly with these, which feels like a cheat code because nobody else can see anything, right? And you put these on, and it's like magic glasses. You can see everything out there. It's really amazing. A lot of fun to fly with. Also, I love stars, so Milky Way. Okay, that was kind of the general C130, the slicks, as we said, right? The kind of all-purpose C130s. That's kind of the stuff we do. I'm going to get into more of the specialized C130s and some of the fun missions C130s have been outfitted for. So I usually teach, again, to like elementary, middle school. So this was originally kind of set up for them. I tried to update a little bit for more educated more educated audience. We'll see. Yeah, you guys are amazing. I love it. So Hurricane Hunters, I was lucky enough to fly with them for a couple of summers, so I got to fly a couple of Hurricanes. Gonzalo was a Cat 4. It was the biggest one I flew, 120 plus mile per hour winds. It's an experience. Most of it was more benign than I expected. I thought it was going to be just insane all of the time, and it wasn't. It's a 120 knot crosswind, but you just turn into the wind and just keep tracking to the eye, right? So we're headed to the eye, but we're not facing the eye, right? You got to turn into the wind, and you know the difference between your heading and your track. So yeah, it's a pretty good turn. Yeah, it feels weird when you're tracking, but it's pretty benign until it's not, and then you just hope you don't die. So it ramps up pretty quickly in some of these storm bands, and we have our max speed. We're talking about the wing cracks. So about 180 knots is as fast as you want to penetrate a thunderstorm. I heard some of you guys talking about thunderstorms you inadvertently got into, and we're just full steam ahead going through some of these storms. If we find a thin spot, we do our best to like pick our way through, but sometimes you're like, it's a magenta arc, and we're just going through because we've got to get to the other side. So it can get pretty sporty, but you don't want to go faster than 180 because there's a lot of stress on the wing roots, right? So we knew we had wing cracking issues. But you're ingesting an insane amount of water in this hurricane. So you also don't want to pull your power out because you don't want to flame out an engine. So you got to have your power in, but you can't go too fast. And you're like, oh, physics, what are we going to do? Well, no one else is in the storm, so that's a plus. So we get to mess with our altitude, which most pilots do not get to do, right? When you're flying, this is your altitude, right? You manage your power for your speed and to hold your altitude. And here we use our altitude to manipulate our speed. So we've got to keep a certain amount of power on the engine so we don't flame it out. But we also can't go faster than 180 because some of these, you will just drop a couple hundred feet and hit before you hit the bottom of that lake. It can get kind of aggressive in there. So if we're getting too fast, we just climb a little bit to keep our speed under control, or sometimes your speed will bottom out and you're going like 120 and you want to get your nose down and get speed up a little bit. So you still got flying speed. So it's the same balance, you're just using a different variable to maintain it. We definitely can't, autopilot cannot handle it. So autopilot cannot handle anything when it gets aggressive. So the pilot is flying it by hand through those parts of the storm. Through the more benign parts, once we get a good angle and stuff, we can hook the autopilot up and take a break, a mental break for a while, but not in the storm bands. And the whole point of people flying through a hurricane, why would you do that? It's to drop this. These are dropsons. And when they fall, they collect a bunch of data. And that is what the National Hurricane Center uses to put into their models, right, to get all the spaghetti charts. So the data that we are providing them is what goes into those charts to get that more refined path of where the storm's going to go. It does several things. It's a little bit bigger than maybe a paper towel roll. It's not huge. It's kind of manageable, big paper towel roll size. It's got GPS, and it gets like the wind data, the humidity, and it tracks all of that on the way down. Does pressure. Pressure is a big deal for a hurricane, right? That's how a hurricane forms. And it passes all of that back to the C130. It has a little radio transmitter. So it passes all that directly into the C130, and we have computers in the C130. That's kind of a new thing or not new, but for the hurricane hunters. They have giant weather computers that receive the information from these dropsons. They track all that data, and then eventually we get that sent to the National Hurricane Center, and that's how they track the storms.
Do you deploy out of St. Croix?
We do typically deploy. It's a strong word for St. Croix. That was my first deployment, and I was like, why is everybody complaining about deployments as I'm on the beach? Yeah. So the hurricane hunters deploy to St. Croix, and which makes sense, right? It gives us a good spot to fly the storms that are coming through the Atlantic, generally off of Africa. I had a really long mission. My longest mission in a C-130 was we cracked 13 hours. And that's crazy for a C-130. So one thing that the hurricane hunters have that other J models don't have, the hurricane hunters are all J models now, is they have the external fuel tanks so they can carry more fuel, specifically for this reason. So we took off out of Croix. We flew what we call pennies, our penetrations through the storm. So NOAA decides all that, the National Atmospheric Association, Oceanic and Atmospheric Association. And we flew our pennies, but the storm was headed for Croix, so we couldn't recover to Croix. We had to recover to Homestead. So it was a 13-hour flight from doing all this and then recovering to Homestead. So it was a long time in the C-130. All right. A little bit more about the hurricane hunters. So here, this was like the radar from Hurricane Gonzalo. So at that point, you don't have a choice. You just got to go through it. So through it we went. This is a Hurricane Hunter aircraft, so 5300. I've flown this plane, and it's a 96 model, so that's how our tail numbers work. So 5300 means it was a 96 model, and then the tag number is 5300. This is the external fuel tank that most J models don't have, but they have for specifically that reason. These are also what we call stubby airplanes, which is really the normal size of a normal C-130. The J models, the new tactical J models, are what we call stretch models. They've got an extra 15-foot plug, which gives them 15 extra feet of cargo space. So this is a Hurricane Bird. It looks like a C-130. They all do, right? But they all have their little special tweaks to make them specialized for their specific mission. So there you go. Oh, I do have video.
There's nothing else structurally that's different about the hurricane.
They have a nickel guard on their props. They're very excited about, and I was like, oh, cool. It's like a 3-inch piece of metal. It just holds the prop boot on. But the props do go through a lot. Going through the hurricanes, there's going to be hail and stuff like that in there. Let me see if the Wi-Fi is working, and if this will come up. It's a little bit of a, yeah. This is looking promising. Do you see it? Nope, you don't see it. Okay. What if I... maybe? Maybe? Okay, making progress.
Breaking news, a massive Category 4 hurricane is heading straight for the East Coast.
More than 1 million people have been told to evacuate.
Millions of Americans are now bracing for this storm.
sometimes it costs $1 million to evacuate a mile of coastline. So the tighter you have that forecast, the fewer people are evacuating. And the forecast is between 25 to 30% more accurate with our data.
It kind of helps narrow that cone about the Hercules down exactly where the storm is going to hit. If we had not been provided that information, can you just imagine how many more lives would have been lost? From a pilot perspective, flying the hurricane goes against everything that we are trained, which is avoid weather, avoid weather. We don't really know what to expect because every single storm is different. Always respect the storm.
Hurricanes are formed over the ocean basins, over warm water. You get a lot of evaporation. They start forming more vertically and get that cyclonic rotation to them. They get stronger. They have the capability of growing higher up in the atmosphere and therefore become hurricanes.
In that moment, when I go out to that place and we get indicating we have tornadoes, we have excessive amount of rain, ice, lightning, we get struck by lightning. So the information that we gather from the flight is provided from the instrument that I brought into the storm to get us the drops on.
The type of data that we're able to gather from our flights is anything from time, location, temperature, viewpoint, wind direction, wind speed, pressures, heights, rain rates, surface wind speeds.
The satellites will provide a good map picture. Let's say it's a map of the United States where our data helps them develop a street map, if you will.
When we fly an index, which is investigation to a potential storm, we fly 500 to 1,000 feet off the ocean surface. We fly all four quadrants of that storm. And what we're doing at that time is investigating to see where the winds are and if there's going to be a circular formation that forms. If there's that circular formation that forms, we know we have a storm.
The stadium effect is the inside eye wall of a hurricane.
Sure enough, it's calm inside, you get blue skies, and there's a stadium. And I'm like, no way, this is so cool.
It's very rare to see, and you're inside what's basically a football stadium made of clouds. What's special about the Hurricane Hunters being a reserve mission is that we get to keep the continuity and not have a turnover of personnel every 3 years like you may have on active duty.
Reservists and airmen provide a variety of different backgrounds from the civilian world. So, for instance, in my situation where I'm an airline pilot, our weather officers, a lot of them work in weather as forecasters, as meteorologists. The most gratifying aspect of my job is knowing that lives are being saved. There's really nothing we can do to stop it, but we can be there to collect the data so that they know where the storm is going next.
If people can get out and evacuate and save lives, that's the most important thing.
There you go. There's a little bit about the hurricane hunters. All right, there we go. So as I was saying, I usually teach this to like elementary, middle schoolers. So I have a whole lesson on the Coriolis effect and how hurricanes form. We'll just skip through this stuff and talk about more airplane stuff. But it is kind of cool. If you haven't ever watched a video, this is a pretty good video from NOAA maybe made this one. No, National Geographic made this one. Pretty cool on Coriolis effect and how hurricanes form. And then we talk about reading weather charts. So I go through, we have the weather symbols and stuff so they know what they're looking at. And go, okay, which one of these is representing a hurricane and why? You know? Pop quiz. We haven't learned anything. Why? This is kind of circly. That's true. That's true. So it's not the gradient of pressure so much as what's in the middle of the pressure. Hurricanes are always formed from low pressure. Right? The whole point is things are trying to get into the center of the hurricane, but because the Earth is round and rotating, the ones closer to the equator are wider, so they're moving faster. So they're trying to get to the center, but they're moving faster, so they really end up over here. Opposite happens from the top. They're trying to get to that low pressure center, but the center is moving faster, so they try and it turns this way. So this turning is happening all the way around. Low pressure, counterclockwise, hurricane. Coriolis effect. Yep. Cool, so here's some more special missions. So I have not flown these, so I have more tertiary information on these, but really cool missions that the C-130 is set up to do. One of them is called the MAFS, which is the Modular Airborne Firefighting System, and it can be installed into a C-130 without modification. So it takes, I think they said about 2 hours to put in a MAFS system, and then they can fill it up in like 20 minutes and dump it. It takes like 5 seconds to drop it, but and then they go back, refill, and go again. They'll usually have a couple in rotation. There's 4 units across the country: California, Wyoming, Colorado, and North Carolina. Each of them have 2, so typically they'll have both of them operating at any given time, right? So one is dropping, the next one will come behind and drop. So pretty cool, really cool capability. They can drop water with the system, or they can drop a slurry. So the slurry is what you see here. It's a little bit thicker. It has ammonium sulfate in it and the red dye, so they can really see, and you can see it on the ground, so they know exactly where their last drop was, so they can target off of that depending on where the fire is moving. Apparently it also fertilizes the ground. I didn't realize that, so I was doing some research, so cool. I have some cool videos, but I also don't want to take too long for you guys.
How do they fill the water in the airplane?
I think all of these are pumped. So some of the, there's a couple planes, there's some seaplanes, and there's some helicopters that can go to like a lake and fill up. My understanding is with the MAF system is everything is pumped into the MAF system. So it just gets pumped in. So we'll talk about all these, and if you want to go back and watch videos, we can, but I don't want to keep you guys, I'm coming up on an hour already. Gunships, really cool. A-10, awesome airplane, basically build an airfoil around a gun. All right, that sounds like fun. So here they put some guns in the back of the C-130. They've got 3 back there, I mean, as big as the 105 howitzer cannon, essentially. It's huge, right? They can do a bunch of different things: close air support, interdiction, reconnaissance, overwatch. They can do convoys, escort convoys. They can call in strikes from the ground, and using MGRS or lat longs, they can know exactly where they need to be and put the bullets exactly where they need to protect our troops on the ground. So, yep. Bunch of the Spec Ops fly out of there. C-130s also do and receive air refueling depending on the C-130. The slicks that I fly are not outfitted for refueling. They have to be outfitted for it. But some of the Spec Ops missions, or some of the KC-135, where their job is to tanker fuel. So we can fly slower than like 135s, so we do better for like helicopters and things like that. So we can tanker fuel and take it to them. A bunch of these pictures are my pictures. If they're not, I've got some links to where they are if anybody's that curious and wants to dig into them. And then we can also receive gas if it's outfitted for it. Yeah, this is cool. I've not flown with them either. This looks like a lot of fun. But my friend who was a navigator in our unit is now I think my computer just died. Apparently the power source up here isn't on. I have it plugged in, but it said it was not receiving fuel. But yeah, so the ski birds, they fly to Schenectady, or they're out of Schenectady, New York, and they fly to Antarctica. They fly out of Christchurch, New Zealand, to get down to Antarctica. And they're down there for a couple months during the year. So I just, Lexi who was my navigator, who now moved there and is flying the ski birds, and we just had dinner a couple of nights ago, and she's like, yeah, we're there for like 2 months. So halfway through October to halfway through December every year, they're down there taking supplies back and forth to Antarctica to supply the science missions going on down there. So they're really just moving things back and forth to Antarctica for them.
Now, the same group that goes to Antarctica half the year goes to Greenland the other half.
They do, yes. They do some training up there. And
they were at Lakeland, and I got to talk to some of their crews. Very interesting, dude.
Very cool. Yeah.
When you're doing your low air drops, like over Rome, Georgia at 500 feet, how do you keep them running over little airplanes like us?
We're on their CTAF, so make your radio calls and we'll make ours and we'll know where we are.
The radio calls are very weak. I was on the left downwind, then I looked over at 2 C-130s.
Yeah. So they should, and I know Rome changed freaks not that long ago, at some point last year, but yeah, we've got ground crews making radio calls, and if we think there's any doubt on that, the airplanes will make the radio calls if we think there's any traffic that is not hearing what's going on.
What about places like, there's a lake over there in West Georgia?
Like Altoona over there? Yeah, we fly over Altoona, yeah.
Well, no, it's another some going real low,
Mhm.
and no radio calls there.
No radio calls on that.
Radar.
Yeah, we've got TCAS. We have TARA. We've got TCAS. There's been some discussion with the ADSB out, whether we turn that on or off. For security reasons, they want us to turn it off, and we're like, no, the real security threat is other airplanes out here. So we kind of pushed back on that for some of our training missions. Sure, if we're doing a mission we don't actually want people to know where we're going, we can turn that off. But if we're doing the same training mission we do every week, it is way more of a hazard to turn that off than not. So yes, you should see us on TCAS, as well as if you guys are squawking, we'll see you guys.
Those are usually traveling in pairs, with trail women, and have something called station keeping.
Yeah, station keeping equipment, ski.
What is that?
It was designed for ships. It was designed for boats.
That's the one you were talking about.
Yeah, but we use it anyway.
You're not using it.
We still use it. Yeah, still use it. SKE, yep, station keeping equipment. So, ski is what we call it, but spelled with an E. Yeah. Oh yeah, thank you. Awesome. So I was super jealous. I didn't know this until I had dinner with her the other night. They get to use the JATO models. So sometimes they land, they have some hard ice and snow that's packed down for them, but sometimes they go off of McMurdoch, they go to some of the further out bases, and the snow is not compressed, and they don't have enough thrust to like pull the C130 on these skis through the snow. So they let some JATO bottles, just jet assisted takeoff. So they got, I think it's 4 on each side, if I'm not mistaken. And they'll get up a little bit of speed, but then when they get a little bit of speed going, they'll light these and just whoosh. Fat Albert uses it too. If you watch the Blue Angels, so cool, so cool. Fat Albert's a J model now. He got updated. But yeah, so JATO is really cool. I did not realize they used them on these ski missions, so I just talked to her. These are her pictures. There's a couple more pictures from her because they are awesome, so I could not put them in. And these were all just her pictures. Who doesn't love a little penguin? Some of the outbase stations. This is banking up over Antarctica, so real pretty. Yeah, cool. So cool. Oh man. Awesome.
The one in the center, down below that's at North Pole.
Yep.
The one on the top left is at the airfield at McMurdo.
Yep. So cool. When did you get to go down there?
Absolutely awesome.
And I heard that the weather isn't terrible at McMurdoch, but it's like negative 50 at the South Pole. Ugh.
That's the only way they get fuel to the South Pole. They
Yes.
have some caravans now, but those 120 missions are almost all between McMurdo and Pole.
Yep.
And when you see those the LC-130s out there, they don't shut the engines off when they're at Pole.
They won't start again.
And they go out there. It looks like they're fueling the plane, but no,
They're
just fueling
defueling.
off the plane.
Yeah.
So you can run the heaters and the ice melters.
Very cool. Yep. It's a really cool mission. Literally. Very cool. All right, so I think that was all the pictures and the things, and we're coming up on an hour, so these are just some more fun adventures. I'm the luckiest person in the world. I've gotten to do so many cool things. I highly encourage people, I don't know if there's a couple still young guys back here. Highly encourage, especially the reserves, it's the best kept secret, I swear. You can get the military training, you can get the experience, you can do these amazing things, and you can still have a complete civilian life, right? I've got kids, I got a family, I run a nonprofit, I've worked as an engineer, I've gotten to do all these amazing things and still have this experience. And you get the GI Bill, you get the training, you get the discipline. I cannot encourage you enough to look at going into the reserves, especially. Active duty would not have gone well for me, but the reserves is amazing that you can do this part-time and still get these experiences. So it's very cool. So this is some low-level formations. Oh, this was off Tinian Island I was talking about. So this used to be an actually decent runway here, right? But all the grass has grown partway into it. And these are our panels at the end. So this is our landing zone. And then we've got 25 more hundred feet for takeoff. There are still definitely less females in the military. So I had 2 females that came out to the airplane, which is rare. And I was like, oh, hey, welcome. I was like, how long have you been in the Air Force? She'd been in like 72 hours. I was like, welcome. Just some other cargo stuff. I don't remember where that one is. I think I have a cool, I don't know if I have it in here. No, I think it was at the beginning. We flew some airdrop over northern Macedonia. That was pretty cool. We did some joint missions with Swift Response out in Italy, and we're flying with our partners out there, dropping like Spanish paratroopers, flying through Albania, the mountains of Albania with like A-10 on our wing, getting escorts and flying into doing airdrops in northern Macedonia. And just like, I can't believe they pay me to do this. The best job in the world. Let's see. Oh, this is flying multi-ship. I think I was a third airplane in this formation, flying in Colorado through the Rockies. It's gorgeous. That is flying low level up the beach in Florida. That was back in the J model days. This is a HUD. This is kind of just to show you what the HUD looks like. So we have all of the information in front of our face as we're looking out the window. Amazing. And it's a pretty sunset. And this is a really cool storm. Pictures never do it justice, right? But like getting the light coming down, it was really pretty. This was really cool. This is one of the only times this has happened for me. So rainbows, right? Normally we think of them as an arc. They're not, right? They're all circles. The horizon just chops it off for us. Well, when you're in the air, the horizon isn't a problem. So this was an entire circular rainbow, right? And we flew through the rainbow. So we flew through the circular rainbow. And you guys might have had that experience up here too. It doesn't happen that often, but it is really cool. So I think that's kind of it. Just, yeah. Any more questions or anything you guys want to talk about? No? Awesome. Thank you. Oh.
So all of our speakers get a mug. So,
Oh, cool.
You gonna film this, and Joel, you're gonna take a picture?
Yeah, I want the first picture with you from my office without question.
What now?
First slide.
Oh, you want me to go back? Okay. Oh, that first one? That one? This was midnight in northern Macedonia. This is my favorite C130 picture I have taken. This was sunrise in Guam. It was amazing. No filters. The sky looked like that. This was sunset in Lithuania, and these were getting an A-10 escort over the mountains of Albania. And like, how are we lucky enough to get to do this? This is amazing. So young ones in the back. Yes.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.